At long last, we've come to the end of the year that all of us will remember for all of the wrong reasons. Yet here on December 30th, things have come full circle for the Oklahoma Sooners. They return to a familiar city, a familiar venue. This time, however, they face an unfamiliar foe. But in a college football season that's brought unprecedented turmoil and uncertainty, what's one more unknown variable? Get up, Sooner Nation. This is Dallas, Texas. This is the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. And this is Game Day U. Well, we just couldn't stay away as 2020 winds down. Game Day U comes to you one final time. And once again, we come to you from AT&T Stadium. She is Caroline Grace. She is Shannon Earhart. I am Parker Thune. Folks, we were just here last week. Well, Shannon, you and I were. Caroline was joining us via the wonders of digital technology. But who would have thought that a week after the Big 12 championship, which ultimately culminated in an Oklahoma victory, we would be right back here for the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic between two teams that have only met once in the history of their programs, guys.
I would like to just point out that we're getting a great behind-the-scenes look as to how this whole stadium comes to fruition.
And it's quite an operation.
Pretty cool. Literally get put down. That's pretty cool.
Well, I'm also pumped to see this Cotton Bowl happen because Florida has never played in the Cotton Bowl before, so I'm excited to see how this matchup really winds up.
And these two teams, of course, have only met once previously, that coming, of course, in the 2009 BCS National Championship game, where Tim Tebow and company knocked off Sam Bradford and the Sooners 24-14. That's the only matchup in the history of these two programs. So there is virtually nothing to go off when we're trying to figure out exactly how this matchup is going to shake out. Obviously, with the way the 2020 schedule was altered, you're not looking at any common opponents. So two teams that also very much don't fit the mold of the conference that they play in, right?
Oh,
the
not
SEC,
at all.
SEC traditionally leans defense heavy. Florida has the most prolific passing offense in the country. Then Oklahoma has demonstrated over the last couple weeks that they are a tremendous defensive team, which is really out of line with what we've come to expect from the Big 12.
Yeah, as negative as it is to say, I think we're about to see two really average teams battle it out.
Yeah, I would agree with you with the two average teams. It's also good to see these teams flip-flop and see Trask take on Rattler and see who is the better QB. You know, Oklahoma's offense has been better than it has been in previous years, so it should be interesting to see how this goes.
Another fun note about this venue, AT&T Stadium, not only hosting the Cotton Bowl this bowl season, but the Rose Bowl as well, as it's been moved from Pasadena to right here. So once we're all wrapped up with the Cotton Bowl between Oklahoma and Florida, things will get set in place for the Rose Bowl. They'll roll out new turf. They'll
big old
Rose. Should we just stay until the Rose Bowl?
You want to cover the Rose Bowl? I guess we haven't gotten a chance to cover the Rose Bowl.
Let's
we weren't around when Oklahoma and Georgia faced off back in that January 1st, 2018 tilt. That was
so
quite a game.
We won't go
Are they
there.
going to do the Rose Bowl parade in Dallas? Or
I don't think so.
Cut it all out?
You know, there's a pandemic going on, so I don't know if they're going to be able to.
I think they put the kibosh on the Rose Bowl
parade.
Thanksgiving
parade, maybe.
We shall see.
It's my favorite part.
Well, as we mentioned, just over a week ago, Oklahoma was right here in this building taking on Iowa State for their sixth consecutive Big 12 title shot. And again, Oklahoma successfully defended the crown, knocking off the Cyclones 27-21. Let's take a look at how it happened. And let's start with the first touchdown of the contest, whom, as everyone expected, went to third-string quarterback Chandler Morris on this 2-yard touchdown run. How about the true freshman?
Caroline, you called it.
I know.
You did that
And
whole
Marvin
story
Mims,
on
another
it.
true freshman, reeling in this 45-yard bomb from Spencer Rattler to put the Sooners up big in the first half. And then from there, the Oklahoma offense stagnated, but the defense held on, picking off Brock Purdy 3 times, one from Trey Norwood, one from Patrick Fields. And then when crunch time came, who would deliver in AT&T Stadium but Trey Brown, the same guy that has made big plays in each of the last 3 Big 12 championship games now. Of course, you go back to the sack of Sam Ehlinger in 2018. You go back to the chase down of Chris Platt in 2019, and then he picks off Brock Purdy to end it in the Big 12 championship game here in 2020 between Oklahoma and Iowa State. The Cyclones denied their first outright conference championship in 129 years of program history. Oklahoma defends the crown yet again, the 6th straight conference championship for the Sooners.
I want to backtrack a little bit. You talk about Trey Brown and how consistent he's been those past 3 years, and I think it really shows his reliability and his leadership in this game and how he's totally wholehearted and puts his full effort forth each and every game. So it's good to see him and the rest of Grinch's unit really working together and putting on a great performance defensively for the first time in a couple of years in the Big 12 championship.
Now that said, Trey Brown opted out of this contest to focus on the NFL draft. We'll touch a bit more on that later. But guys, impressions from the Big 12 championship, obviously not the tremendous offensive performance we're used to witnessing from Oklahoma, but you got to be pleased with the way that the defense stepped up when Rattler and the offense couldn't necessarily string together scoring drives in the second half of that contest.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say like the biggest lesson learned was consistency, and that consistency is a must in the game. The Sooners scored 3 touchdowns in the first half, which was great, but they held them to a 17-point lead at one point in the game, but then they slowly let the Cyclones just creep back in, and we just saw a shift in the momentum there.
Yeah, like we were talking about, the defense, the consistency. I'm going to have to say that in order for, or what I was impressed with the Big 12 championship was the defense really stepped up. Now, like we said, Trey Brown is not going to be there. But in order for them to take on Florida with the momentum out of the Big 12 championship, it's going to be on the defense. Against Iowa State, they still let up 435 yards, but they were 9-13 on third down conversions. But here was the key, turnovers. We've got to have those turnovers on defense in order to shut down a big-name player like Kyle Trask. So they're going to have to be consistent, and they're going to have to step up. And it's going to be kind of hard to rely on them because they haven't been consistent all season, but hopefully they're able to shift back into game mode and really step up.
Well, we saw that defensive pressure in the Big 12 championship really lead to a lot of those turnovers, but the sad part is that the offense didn't score on any of those turnovers and wasted all those chances, scoring only a field goal in the second half. That's where they need to stay consistent and lead the ball more on the ground and just use those running backs and wideouts to really push the ball up the field.
That's true, but now, yes, our offense needs to score when we get those turnovers, but I think the most important thing, especially against Dan Mullen's offense, is they need to eat the clock. You need to keep the ball out of Kyle Trask's hands as long as possible.
I think what became apparent more so than anything else in this Big 12 championship game is that the narrative is changing in Norman, and we started to get inklings of that mid-season when you started to see Oklahoma ramp up the defensive effort, get to the quarterback with regularity, and keep points off the board. And for their last 5 regular season games, they allowed 14 points or less. So it was becoming apparent that Oklahoma was maybe a little bit more of a defensive powerhouse, at least in Big 12 terms, than anybody could have anticipated at the beginning of the season. And I think it's really telling to me that the Sooners scored 60, or rather they scored 28 or more points in 60 consecutive contests going back to September 2016. That streak ended against Baylor when they put up 27. They put up 27 against Iowa State. And in both cases, it was enough to get them the win. Look, the harsh reality is that 27 points 2 years ago or even a year ago probably isn't enough to win Oklahoma a football game. But here in 2020, it is.
Especially against an SEC team. They have not been putting up, or they have been putting up numbers, but if our defense is able to stop those big plays, then 27 points is going to win a football game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll see a three-peat with 3 27-point games in a row. That'd be kind of crazy, and see them win it all.
Well, 27 points probably won't be enough to beat Florida. So if that's the case, Oklahoma
might.
Hey,
it could be a really strong defensive game.
That's the only thing that's going to save them with 27 points is stepping up on defense.
Well, the new normal for the Sooners, of course, is that they're not a team that needs to score 45 points to beat you. They can beat you in a variety of different ways, and nobody's more thrilled about that reality than Lincoln Riley.
I mean, I would have loved to have not had to play the field position game and, done a way better job on third down the other day than we did. But that's, those things happen. Those games happen, and you've just got to be able to find a way to win. If you only got one recipe, then, eventually that's going to catch up with you. And so that's what excites me about this team, because we do have the capability to really, make things tough on opposing offenses. We've shown the capability of being explosive offensively. we want to push for more and more, certainly on both sides of the ball, and never a sense of satisfaction, but we have shown the ability to win games.
So Oklahoma now heads into a matchup with arguably the most formidable opponent that they've faced all season, at least on the offensive side of the football. Dan Mullen, Kyle Trask, and this Florida passing attack, and we touched on it at the top, they're dangerous. And they won't have Kyle Pitts at their disposal, their star tight end, but still a team with plenty of weapons in the passing game and plenty of ways to beat you down the field.
Oh, we don't have our star tight end either, so I think this is a pretty even matchup.
You're missing Austin Stogner.
I'm missing Austin Stogner.
I think Kadarius Toney, though, is really going to step up and step into those shoes, and we'll see him go down the stretch a little bit more because we know that Kyle Trask just likes to launch the ball down the field. The game on the ground is never really there, so they get all of their points in the air, so it's really going to be up to our secondary to not be a liability and just really play the game that they've been playing these past 7 games.
And one thing that we talked about in our production meeting that I don't think we've touched on yet is the fact that these two teams are coming in with distinctly different waves of momentum, right? Oklahoma coming in off 7 consecutive wins, Florida rolling in off back-to-back losses. How much of an impact do you think that makes?
Well, I think where the difference lies with me is not between players or the way you play. It's between Dan Mullen and Lincoln Riley. You know, Dan Mullen's got that fired up attitude. So for me, I see Dan Mullen coming in here, riling his team up, saying, you know, this is what we got to do. Kind of like that Kirby Smart video, I think, from 2 years ago where he's just dropping F-bombs and telling them they've got to win, where Lincoln's going to go in and say, you know what, guys, we're on a 7-game win streak. You're good enough to beat this team, so let's just go do it.
I think I'm going to take a different approach. I see what you're saying. I like that mentality, but I think that Lincoln Riley's going to come in way more fired up and say we need to keep this momentum going, and they're going to want to end on a high note with a showstopper. So if they can, I think they're going to do all they can to really blow this team out of the water. I may be stating the obvious, but they got to put their full effort into all 60 minutes of the game, and if they don't, it's going to be a loss for Florida. The Florida Gators are just as good as this Oklahoma Sooners team, and I feel like they're both pretty evenly matched up, that this will be the best contest that OU has had this season.
Now, it's the first time since 2016 that Oklahoma won't be playing for a berth in the national championship game in bowl season. Do you worry at all about a letdown, just given the fact that in the grand scheme of things, at least in terms of what they're accustomed to, the Sooners aren't really playing for anything meaningful against Florida?
No, I mean, this is a bowl. This is what I have wanted to see the last 3 years. Instead of going to a bowl game and getting blown out of the water, instead of going to a playoff game and getting blown out of the water, let's go play a good bowl game against a good team that we're evenly matched up against, like Florida.
Exactly. I would say the same thing. They're at the same level, and I think winning this bowl game and playing in it and having a good contest will give them a lot of confidence, too. And Lincoln Riley has been in the playoffs 4 times, all 4 years he's been in OU. So I think it'll be a good shift of momentum to have him play in a bowl game and just have a good matchup. I'm excited to see this.
Another fun note. This is, of course, Lincoln Riley's 4th bowl game in 4 seasons as head coach at Oklahoma. He's played 4 different SEC opponents.
Well,
the first 3 of those, of course, all being losses.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was about to go on and say is this playing a good Florida SEC team is going to give you just as much credit as it's going to give you more credit than losing to an SEC team in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're just getting started here on Game Day U. Coming up next, it was a wild, wild year across college football, and it culminated in one of the wildest college football playoff selection Sundays that we have seen. We'll break down our beef with the process. And believe me, Caroline in particular has beef, so stick around. Welcome back to AT&T Stadium, home of the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic and occasionally the Dallas Cowboys, who somehow are still in contention for an NFL playoff berth and an NFC East title, but that's not what we're here to break down. Parker Thune, Caroline Grace, Shannon Earhart. This is Game Day U, previewing Florida's matchup with Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, which comes your way this evening, 7 p.m. from right here in this building once they get all the turf laid. Once they get this place ready to roll for football.
He's getting there. They got about 60 more yards.
Some concerts in the back. Makes me miss it really bad. But I think we've seen George Strait, U2. Oh, Black Eyed Peas right now.
I'm fascinated by how deliberate of a process it is to lay down all this turf. They've been at it ever since we've been here. So
Yeah,
props to
they've
them
been at it
for
for a
the
while. That show how it's made. I want to know how all these are made and like transported to the stadium. Interesting.
well, perhaps that can be a new
Another
Game Day
show.
U investigative series. Yeah, if you want
I
to
like
take that
I
on.
like that.
Some of those vehicles are very
We
loud
need to
too.
get Sydney Boyer, Lindsey Gibbs on the story,
This
on the
is
feature.
true. This is true. All right, folks, it is that time. Let's discuss the college football playoff. And of
Let's.
course, the prevailing opinion ever since the college football playoff system was instituted is that the playoff system created more questions than it answered, at least in terms of what we were accustomed to with the BCS system. Now, Caroline, Shannon, this year, it was pretty obvious from the get-go that there was going to be a lot of controversy on Selection Day, just based on how some of these teams stacked up against one another, given the fact that some of these teams would have played 11 or even 12 games, while some other teams had played no more than 6. So nobody was going to be completely satisfied with the way that the playoff field shook out. Now, given the field that we got, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, do you agree with it? And if not, what's your beef? Shannon?
All right, well, I do agree with it because I did call it, but I do have some qualms with it. There was no logic whatsoever with the selection process. It was clear that the committee was really focused on those big brands versus those smaller brands, and the losses seemed to matter for some teams but not others. Take Cincinnati. Cincinnati ran through their schedule at 9-0. They have a better resume than 3-loss Florida and 2-loss OU, and they were ranked lower at 8 than both. So why should these smaller teams even participate in the playoff system? They went undefeated and were completely disregarded, which is just not fair and doesn't make sense. Indiana. Gotta harp on Indiana a little bit because they were placed outside of the Big Ten. Their only loss was to Ohio State, which was a close game. And the argument the committee made was that they had a weak schedule. Indiana and Ohio State played the same teams. Northwestern was the only difference. And Northwestern lost to Michigan State, who Indiana pummeled. The committee used Ohio State's loss over Northwestern and Indiana as proof that they belonged in the playoff. Well, what doesn't make sense here to me is that either Indiana is good and Ohio State belongs in the playoffs, or Indiana is bad and there's no justification for Ohio State to be in the playoffs. It can't be both. There's no logic at all. Now I'm going to talk about Georgia a little bit. Georgia's going to the Peach Bowl. They have two losses and lost to a top 25 team. Indiana was punished for playing no big games. Why wasn't Georgia? That also doesn't make sense. Now, North Carolina, they're in the Orange Bowl. They had 3 losses and are in the ACC. They already have 2 teams going into the playoffs. So the spot should have gone to Indiana or Coastal Carolina. Why did it go to UNC, a team that is much weaker and lower ranked than Indiana and Coastal?
Well, I can answer that.
Well, it's clear the little guy doesn't matter, and it's annoying. It makes no sense. There's no logic whatsoever in it.
So the ACC does have a direct conference tie-in with the Orange Bowl, which is why North Carolina got that selection.
There should be no more tie-ins, though, because there's
Yes.
other teams that are ranked higher than UNC.
Exactly, and you make a very valid point, and it's one of the things that, with regard to the entire system, doesn't quite add up at times. And I
Yeah.
thought you saw evidence of that in North Carolina earning that New Year's Six selection when they didn't even make the ACC title game.
Sam Howard is not worth it.
Sam, who now?
Howard?
Howell?
Howell?
I mean, he's
I mean, it
irrelevant.
doesn't
I get
really
that's why.
matter.
I get that's probably why you didn't know his name, is because UNC doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
Shane Shane Ellinger earlier this season.
that did happen.
It happens.
We don't need to reopen old wounds. Go ahead, Caroline. What's your
Yeah,
spiel?
I mean, how much more time do we have? Because I just think this whole system is ridiculous. The problems I have don't lie more within the individual team. It's with the whole system. The whole reason we got rid of the BCS was because we were tired of seeing those same teams get into the playoffs, or seeing those same teams not play anyone, like TCU, Boise State, and then they were in the playoffs every year, and they would either win big or lose big. And then we changed the system because we said, you know what, hey, we need to get some of those little guys, like you said, in there. And it hasn't happened. We have seen the same teams every year. It goes between Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Clemson, Oklahoma. And with the exception of another outstanding SEC team every year.
It's disrespectful.
Right. My
towards the little
whole
guys.
problem with this is that they harped on the BCS and how terrible of a system it was. So then they created the college football playoff system. And what problems has it resolved? None. And here's another thing I have an issue with. Conference championships. So when we had the BCS system, conference championships meant a lot. And we wanted to change that. The whole point was to change that so that way we had teams like Texas A&M, who couldn't get to their conference championship but were clearly better than Florida, could get into the playoffs. So why is that not happening now? I have an issue with the fact that I'm seeing the same 4 teams play every year, and on a year like 2020, why didn't we just test run it? Why didn't we expand the playoffs? I think there's plenty of teams that played enough games that could get in, like Coastal Carolina. Now, they did lose to Liberty, but in the beginning, to start with, I think they should have had a better bowl game. It was just disrespectful that a team like that could go and win that many games and get disrespected and have to play Liberty in a bowl game, just like UCF. And UCF, for instance, they went on and beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. That's a big bowl game. Why are we not changing this system when we clearly see the same results? And I know the argument is we're going to see the same 4 teams in the playoff every year regardless of how we work the system, but like Kurt and I were talking on the way here, it doesn't end up like that. Take March Madness, for instance. You're going to have upsets along the way if you just expand the playoffs or put teams in that actually deserve it, like Cincinnati. Cincinnati and Texas A&M are really where all of this stems from with me. I think that those 2 teams deserve a shot to play Notre Dame or Clemson. I just have a big issue with the way the whole system is set up because we're running into the exact same problem.
I completely agree with you 100%, and I can tell you why. It's because the committee consists of 13 guys in a room who decide everything for everybody. There should be other ideas pitched in from other people, and it should be expanded. The playoffs should be expanded to at least 6 teams, if not 8. So then there's more chances for teams like Cincinnati, Indiana, Coastal, those teams that are good teams to actually get a chance and play.
Yeah, and even if we're going to stay on the Power 5, let's take conference championships, for instance. Now, there's got to be some consistency because when it came to Clemson and Notre Dame, it was kind of like, whatever, Notre Dame lost. Let's still put them in the playoffs. Ohio State wins 6 games and they play in their conference championship, but because they won their conference championship, we're going to put them in the playoffs. There's no consistency. Either championship games matter or they don't. And there has to be a rule of thumb and there has to be some consistency across the board in order to get those other teams in. I would have loved to see Texas A&M upset Notre Dame and keep them out of the playoffs, or Cincinnati upset Oklahoma, who would have also got in. Something else other than the same teams we're seeing every year, and that also qualifies Oklahoma. I'm tired of seeing them go to the playoffs every year and get blown out of the water.
I'm much more excited for this Oklahoma-Florida game.
Yeah.
You stole a lot of my thunder there, Caroline, but
Sorry.
I think, no, it's okay. Because I think we're very much on the same page. I think the issue with the way that the playoff system has been created and has been treated by those with the power to make the calls over its first, 6-7 years of existence now, is that there is no path for the little guy. There is absolutely no path for a group of 5 team to make the college football playoff. And I think if there was a year for a group of 5 team to make the playoff, this would have been it. Because Cincinnati was 9-0. Coastal Carolina was 11-0. Both of those teams had quality wins. Coastal Carolina actually had 2 top 25 wins over Louisiana and BYU. That was a team that had a college football playoff resume, but they couldn't even crack the New Year's Six. And so I go back to the origin of the discussion whereupon we first started talking about expanding the college football playoff, right? It was towards the end of the 2000s that we kind of started moving in that direction. And it was because year in and year out, as you mentioned, Caroline, you would see group of 5 teams go unbeaten and not get a chance to play for the national championship. You saw it with several years with Boise State. TCU had back-to-back unbeaten seasons. Ball State went undefeated one year. And then I'm firmly convinced, and I will take this to my grave, I firmly believe that Utah would have won the national championship in 2008 if they'd gotten the chance to play for it, because they went unbeaten and then went and shellacked Nick Saban in Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. So I'm tired of the argument that group of 5 teams don't get an in or can't get an in because their resume doesn't stack up with that of a Power 5 team that has a loss or 2. A group of 5 team is never going to have a resume that peripherally stacks up with a Power 5 team because they don't have the same respect put on their name that the Power 5 does. And so, if you're a group of 5 team, all you can do is win every single game on your schedule, right? There's absolutely nothing more you can do. That is the only thing that is within your grasp. That's the only thing that you can control. If you have a 0 in the loss column at the end of the season, I don't care who you are, what conference you play in, you should have an opportunity to compete for a national title.
Yeah, but they're completely disregarded, and that's ridiculous. You said it, strength of schedule. They are playing at the same level as 2 Big Ten teams, 2 SEC teams play, 2 Power 5 teams match up at the same level. It's the same competitiveness, so give them a chance to play up against the big dogs and the Power 5 teams instead of putting up against some like a low-level team.
And here's my biggest issue. The 2 teams that ultimately ended up vying for the number 4 slot on Selection Day were Notre Dame, fresh off a 24-point loss in the ACC championship game to Clemson, and Texas A&M, who lost to Alabama by 28 earlier in the season. So we've seen that those 2 teams can't compete with the elites in college football. So what do we have to lose by sticking a group of 5 team in there?
Okay, that's not necessarily true, though, because what about Notre Dame Clemson? We've seen those teams play each other already, and then we saw Clemson beat Notre Dame by what, 20?
Well, the Trevor Lawrence effect.
But it was also, we needed to have another contest.
How is that an argument for Notre Dame, but not an argument for Texas A&M? And then how are we going to sit here and listen to Dabo Swinney 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, argue we can't help that we don't play anyone on our schedule, but because they're a Power 5 school, we're going to put them in over teams like Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina.
I do think this year, though, that Clemson did deserve it. I'm sure we all are all on the same page with that. Notre Dame, yeah, that was iffy, but it'll be good to see them play that 3rd contest if Notre Dame beats Alabama.
That's what I'm saying.
And have that best of 3.
It was good for Clemson, but what's the justification for Notre Dame at this point?
All right, we could stand on these soapboxes all day. We'll table this conversation till brunch after we're done here.
Like anyone's listening to our opinion, but...
But moving on. Let's talk about the non-college football playoff bowls that have some intrigue. Obviously, you saw one of those in Liberty and Coastal Carolina, 2 of the most outstanding group of 5 teams throughout the season, matching up in the Cure Bowl just a few days ago. Liberty, of course, ended up getting the win there. But I want to know, of the bowls that remain, one non-college football playoff bowl that you will be watching. Go ahead, Shannon.
Well, I talked about it a little bit earlier. Both of these teams, Cincinnati and Georgia. I want to see the Peach Bowl. I think it's going to be a great game. It's Georgia's 24th appearance in a bowl game, but they have 8 players opting out for the first time. Cincinnati is one of 2 teams in the top 20 in scoring offense, and total defense, Alabama being the other one. They're going to play with anger. They know that they deserve a higher spot than 8. The defensive unit has 15 interceptions, and it's led by Jarrell White and Kobe Bryant. So it's going to be interesting to see how JT Daniels matches up against that Cincinnati secondary. Are there going to be a lot of interceptions? What are we going to see there? It's technically a road game for Cincinnati as well, since it's going to be in Georgia, close to Georgia. So it'll be cool to see that matchup happen because I feel like Cincinnati will put up a good contest against Georgia, even though Georgia does lead the matchup series 2-0. So the Peach Bowl is something I will be watching besides the Cotton Bowl.
Well, I'm going to go with the Citrus Bowl. So
Come on.
Before you get into that, about me picking Auburn, I'm going Auburn Northwestern. If you don't know, that's who's playing in the Citrus Bowl. But I have a better motive to it. We need Auburn to just blow Northwestern out of the water so that way Ohio State is laughable.
Don't think
that
that's
way
happening.
The college football playoff committee just looks like a complete joke. That's the only way that I think that they're finally going to see that there's no justification as to why Ohio State.
Somehow.
I said that's what we need to happen, not what's going to happen. But let me go into what's probably going to happen. I think that Patty Fisher, the number 2 defensive player in the Big Ten, is going to be a great matchup against Bo Nix in the run game, especially against Tank Bigsby, who has not been that healthy over the last couple of games. And I think that defensive back Seth Williams is going to have a run for his money against Brandon Joseph, who has already had 6 interceptions. But here's the thing. We all know that Seth Williams has an attitude problem. So I think Northwestern could very easily go in here and say, you know what, Seth Williams, we're not dealing with you today. And they're going to run all over him. I think it's going to be a good matchup.
I don't know how you incorporated Auburn, and I think every single game day you show that we have. But
okay, well,
you did it, baby.
Somehow Caroline has found a way to tie the entire college football playoff selection process back to Auburn. I'm impressed,
I think that Peyton
honestly.
Ramsey is an outstanding quarterback, and I wish he could have done better against Ohio State. I don't really know what happened there. His total offensive yards for the season are up almost 1,500. He's only played 6 games. I think he's really going to outshine Bo Nix, and he's going to put up a lot of numbers against that Auburn defense. But
I think the final score of this Auburn-Northwestern game might be like 6-3.
You think?
Because neither of these teams can play.
They're both very good defensively. Northwestern is a very good team
No, I'm
defensively.
thinking more like 21-6. Northwestern probably, but maybe it'll be like 35-0.
Ramsey's
Auburn.
going to run over.
I think Peyton
Auburn
Ramsey has the opportunity to take a hold of his wide receivers and just shove them down Seth Williams' throat because he needs an attitude check. And I don't know.
Alrighty then.
Everyone should be saying War Eagle because Ohio State.
I see what
This
you're
all goes back
saying
to
there.
why. Sorry, this all goes back to why Ohio State doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs.
I'm just really looking forward to the Orange Bowl between Texas A&M and North Carolina because I think North Carolina is going to get shellacked. We've been over this. I think North Carolina is going to get utterly annihilated by Texas A&M. Not that Texas A&M is that good, but North Carolina is also really not that good.
Hey, Matt Bowling's listening to you.
I'm aware of this.
And
Sam Howell's
and
gonna fail.
Tyler DeLuca.
So I'm excited for, well, I guess this could go one of either two ways because North Carolina does have a really explosive offense. I'll give them credit for that. When they put up points, they put them up in bunches. So
Yeah, but it doesn't
either what's
happen
going to
often.
happen
It's
is
sporadic.
either what's going to happen is Texas A&M is going to show up and manhandle North Carolina, or North Carolina is going to come out, put some early scores on the board, and just pile it on A&M. I don't think this game is going to be close one way or another. I'm just excited for two extremely annoying fan bases in the Gingham crowd and the Tar Heels.
We lost UNC.
A&M is, I think, I would have liked to see them. They're the underdog of the SEC.
A&M's a cult,
Their
but we
O-line
can
is
save that discussion
good.
for another day. All right, when we come back here on Game Day U, our predictions for national champion. With the college football playoff field set, we're going to tell you who emerges holding the trophy. Stay with us on Game Day U. As we continue to inch closer to the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic, this is Game Day U from AT&T Stadium. Parker Thune, Caroline Grace, and Shannon Earhart halfway home on this special bowl season installment of Game Day U. And again, as we mentioned at the top of the show, ladies, it is the first time in our collegiate careers, in our collegiate lifetimes, that Oklahoma will not be playing for a college football playoff, or rather be playing in the college football playoff for a berth in the national championship. However,
Sad day.
we do see a lot of the usual suspects in the college football playoff field. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, they've all been here before. Notre Dame, in fact, is the only school among those four that hasn't been here multiple times in the college football playoff.
Right. Freshman year, was it Notre Dame?
Your freshman year?
Yeah, Notre Dame.
Would have been
Parker's freshman
2018.
year.
2018
Who
was
it when
Alabama.
Ohio State wasn't in. That was
Yes,
2018.
Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. And Oklahoma ended up losing to Alabama, of
Of
course, in
course.
the
That was our senior year.
Orange Bowl. And
No, that was our senior year was Georgia. We lost to Georgia in the Rose Bowl.
2018?
28 football season 2018.
Oh, I thought you, yeah.
it's okay, Shannon. We don't need to relive the high school days. You're past those.
Oh,
okay,
no.
so
I'm washed up.
yeah, we can close the yearbook on that. Now let's discuss who we believe is going to win the national championship here in 2020. As I mentioned, Alabama, Clemson, number one, number two. It feels like it's been that way for a decade. Even though it hasn't, it certainly feels like it. It seems like every year those two teams are in the mix. Then you got Ohio State and Notre Dame, two teams. There was a lot of question regarding each of those teams' appearance in this field because Ohio State, of course, had played only 6 games. Notre Dame was coming off a 24-point loss to Clemson in the ACC title game. So I think you have a very clear divide between the top two and the bottom two in this playoff field. That said, do you expect one of those bottom two teams to make an unexpected title run, or you sticking with the Blue Bloods in
What he's saying
Alabama and
is
Clemson?
no,
Who do you got winning the national
Absolutely not.
championship, Shannon?
Thank you for clarifying. I know, but Alabama's going to win, hands down. They have had 3 chances to win a national title and haven't done it. It's their year to stand out and actually win this time. They're the top-ranked scoring offense in the playoff, and with that combination of Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, and Mac Jones, it's unstoppable. The quality of the team is insane. They have the nation's number 2 passing yards leader, the 3rd-ranked rusher, and a top receiver by more than 300 yards. Notre Dame will not be able to contain all 3. They're dominating the league. They absolutely rolled their schedule, and the momentum is up. So why would it drop not for the biggest game of the year? Both Clemson and Alabama do have the same number of appearances in the college football playoffs. They both have that 6-3 record as well. So it's really going to come down to who has more physicality and mental awareness. And I think Alabama's going to do this one. Saban has been here way too many times. He's been involved in every single college football playoff appearance. So it's his year to absolutely dominate Clemson and take home the Natty.
I have a backup for the backup for the backup for the backup. Thank you for reminding me, Shannon, that Alabama is just always going to be here. And later on in my career, I will, come to terms with that and think logically. But until then, I'm going with Clemson as the national champion.
Hey now.
I think that Dabo Swinney has a lot to prove. He wants to shut a lot of people up. I think he's going to really make Trevor Lawrence shine during these playoffs so that way people know he deserves to be in the Heisman talk. I don't really have much else to say. We all know that Clemson is probably the better team offensively, but defensively, Alabama's able to shut them down. So I don't really know how much further they're going to make room against Alabama, but I do think that Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney are the most
Nick Saban is the most winningest coach in college football.
right, but when it comes to who's going to beat Nick Saban, it's going to be Dabo Swinney.
He's probably the only one that can contest.
Right.
If you don't have much else to say, Caroline,
Yeah,
I'll
take
say
it
it for you. You know what Clemson has that Alabama doesn't? Do either of you know?
Trevor Lawrence.
The answer is
A
not
movie
Trevor
on
Lawrence.
Disney Plus.
Although that's a good guess.
They do Clemson has a movie on Disney Plus.
Do they? I didn't realize
just
this.
Came out. It's called Safe.
Come on,
Okay, I'll take a look
I'm
at
antsy.
that. But, okay, what Clemson has that Alabama doesn't is the best coordinator in college football, Brent Venables.
right.
We, as Oklahomans, should be quite familiar with him because he's the guy that Bob Stoops ran out of town in favor of his brother.
Oh,
But
wow. That was
ever since arriving at Clemson, Brent Venables has made his hay as the Tigers' defensive coordinator and clearly established a reputation as the best defensive mind in the nation. And we saw this 2 years ago in the BCS National Championship game when he went up against Tua Tagovailoa and one of the greatest offenses that college football has ever seen and just absolutely shut it down.
But how has he been doing
Start
this year?
to finish.
How has he been doing this year? Not too hot.
Okay, that's a good
That's-
point, though. I am going with Clemson still because you're not going to change my mind. However, he had to face Ian Book. He should have been able to stop Notre Dame the first time
And,
without Trevor Lawrence.
here's what you must keep in mind. He had 3 key players down due to COVID-19 in that first game against Notre
3?
Dame. Yes, which was, and you saw what happened the second time
That's
around when he
yes.
had a full defense at full strength. Absolutely, Notre Dame could make no offensive headway against Clemson. And so, with that in mind, I'm taking Clemson because I think as good as Alabama is, Venables has proven that he's Alabama's kryptonite. And this Alabama defense, or rather this Alabama offense, has not faced a defensive challenge as viable as they
Right.
will face
Right.
with Venables
That's
and
true.
Clemson. So I
You
like
know,
the
I
Tigers.
bet
you're
you're
wrong.
really, so
I bet you're wrong.
I actually originally didn't pick Alabama or Clemson, so I'm kind of in the middle ground, just refusing to pick Alabama. So I'm really just hearing your arguments and trying to come up with a concise decision. But
Listen, I'm on the Brent Venables train. I've been on it for a long time.
I'm on the
That
Saban
man's a
train
stud.
this time. Roll
Okay,
Tide.
but let me ask you this. In the ACC, I feel like it's more of a passing game, and they're about to have to deal with a really tough rushing game with Najee Harris. So
And Devontae Smith.
Devontae
Not
Their
worried.
defense will not be able to keep up with that combination.
We shall see. Now, let's shift gears here. Because Oklahoma is not playing for a national title this time for the first time since 2016. Let's take a look ahead to next year, 2021, and what that will hold for the Sooners. I want to hear one bold prediction that you have for the Oklahoma Sooners
The crystal ball.
in the 2021 season. Shannon,
You
fire
did
away.
You did make me think of the crystal ball. But here's my prediction. It's that Alex Grinch is going to be gone after the 2021 season. Not during, but after. The way this defense has changed is night and day. In just 2 seasons, they went from being one of the worst defenses to being ranked in 20th in total D and 3rd best in rushing defense. Defense is definitely hands down the difference in this team, and it's thanks to Grinch. It's clear why teams want him. He's proved that he can build a defense from the ground up, and that's what suffering teams are looking for. He got the attention of Arizona after only 2 years. Just imagine what it's going to be like when he keeps up his consistency through this next season. He will be snagged in 2021, and he deserves a head coaching spot. If the opportunity presents himself, he's going to take it. There's no reason why he shouldn't. He's up to that next level, and he's past par. He's way above par. So, or under par? It'd be under par.
it kind of depends on.
All right, he's shooting a hole in one there. But
Hole-in-one, yeah,
he's
we'll go
shooting a hole in one there. He's going to be gone after 2021 season. Lincoln Riley even said that if he is presented that head coaching job, that he should take it. There's no reason why you wouldn't.
You know, I just don't really know if I agree with you because I don't know why the resume from Oklahoma is getting him a head coaching job because, frankly, I don't think our defense has improved that much. I think they've gotten better, but I truly do not think they can
completely
hang with
disagree.
anyone in the country.
Shannon's about to make war on you,
I
Caroline.
Okay, well then let me move on.
I don't know
but
if we have time for that.
I just don't think our defense is that spectacular. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the offense. And my bold prediction is that Spencer Rattler transfers. We know we have Caleb Williams coming in, and we saw that Chandler Morris can easily get the job done as backup. Now, Spencer Rattler does not have the attitude of Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa or any of those other cases where we've seen two good quarterbacks try to battle it out. He's not going to get the starting spot, and he's going to leave. I don't really know if I can blame him because he could be good anywhere else, but I think he was overrated to begin with. He can struggle sometimes with his attitude. That's just because he's young. I don't think he's as arrogant as people lead him on to be. But Caleb Williams takes his spot, and he transfers.
Don't agree with you at all there.
I love that prediction.
I
love
agree
it
with you.
because I've been saying it for months,
No,
and I'm glad you're
Rattler
finally
needs
on this
another
train
year
too.
with the Sooners. He's not going to be prepared to go to the NFL next year.
Well, no,
certainly.
he's not going to the
Well,
NFL.
he can't go to the NFL
because he's
yeah.
going to transfer.
Okay, here's my prediction. I've been holding to this prediction for about 3 years now, and it's looking like there's a decent chance it comes to fruition with the direction of this program. I believe Oklahoma is going to win the national championship next season. I think the Sooners
Because of
are
Caleb
going
Williams.
to take home a title, and whether it's Spencer Rattler or Caleb Williams at the helm of this offense, everything is coming together. And Shannon and I were discussing this before the show, Caroline. The Sooners have 4 first-round caliber players at one position, at defensive end. They have Nick Benito, Ronnie Perkins, Isaiah Thomas, and you forget about Jalen Redmond, who opted out, but is going to be back. And maybe Perkins jumps to the NFL. Benito, there's a chance he jumps as well. But this defense is going to be terrifying next year, especially with some of the younger guys that they've got up and coming
They're already
in the system.
terrifying now.
Okay, defensive front is better than our secondary. I will give you that. Our secondary still struggles.
Absolutely.
Just gonna leave
but
that there.
they're only going to get better between
Yeah.
this year and next.
Okay.
And you return so much of the talent. You're not. There's potential that you're not going to lose any of those seniors. I get Trey Brown, who's already opted out. He's moving on to the NFL.
Not
Creed
that
Humphrey's
big
probably
loss.
following suit. But everybody that wants to come back next year can come back because they're not losing any eligibility this season. So,
Right, exactly.
given how much youth there is currently on this Oklahoma team and the fact that they're not going to graduate or have many of those upperclassmen move on to the NFL or to the next level or the next phase of their lives, whatever the case may be, I'm really confident that this Oklahoma team, with how much they have improved and how much they have matured here in 2020, that they can make a national championship run. They were very close to it this year.
I'll back you up on that, Parker. I definitely agree with you. But I think that's only if Spencer Rattler stays. He needs to be here for another year because Caleb Williams isn't going to be ready to play at that college
Here's
football
something
level.
I'll throw out.
Caleb Williams 100% will be ready.
I don't
to
think
play.
Lincoln Riley's going to put him in that spot yet. I think Spencer Rattler's going to definitely outshine him, and Caleb Williams will be right there on that back. Kind of like that Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky combination there. I think it's a very good matchup, a very good playing
Listen,
field. I think that's going
leave
to
the
push each other
Bears
to be
out
better.
of this, okay,
Oh,
Shannon? We
say,
get you're a
well-
Chicago girl. Leave the Bears out of it.
It's true. It makes sense.
Okay, here's one thing that I will throw out as we wrap up here and head to our final segment, final words, score predictions, call-outs, all that good stuff. Consider what would have happened if Oklahoma had played the same schedule that Ohio State played this year. If they had started play on October 24th, as
Which
Ohio
the
State
Big
did,
Ten
which
did on
was
purpose.
which was the TCU game. Think about how good on both sides of the football Oklahoma has been since that TCU game, and how they never would have had the chance to slip up against Kansas State and Iowa State. If Oklahoma's season had begun in Fort Worth on October 24th, we are looking right now today at a team that is right there with Alabama as the odds-on favorite to win the national championship.
I would agree
And-
with. I would
Parker,
agree
that's
with you
just
there.
a steep prediction for
No,
this
because
year.
it's more practice games for Spencer Rattler versus
Well,
throwing him in
okay,
with like the toughest
okay,
teams in the league.
Right, and I can agree with maybe next year, but I just don't. I'm just not. I don't think we're as good as you guys are leading on.
That may be true. I think we will get a pretty good indicator of how good they actually
Very
are
true.
when they take this field
Very true.
against the Florida
It's almost
Gators
done.
this evening. Coming up next here on Game Day U, as we mentioned, final words, call-outs, and score predictions for tonight's game between the Sooners and the Gators from AT&T Stadium. This is Game Day U. Back Back with you here on Game Day U for the final segment of this chaotic 2020 season. It has been a pleasure to share it with all of you despite the circumstances. Parker Thune alongside Caroline Grace and Shannon Earhart. Folks, this is the end. We have officially come to the end. We thought the Baylor show was the end. We thought the Big 12 Championship show was the end. We're back again, but this actually is the end this time.
No,
so
I'm glad we came from Nebraska, Alabama, Chicago.
Came together as one
to make this work. We're in AT&T Stadium. We haven't gotten to travel all season.
Can't believe we did it. We pulled it off.
We did indeed. All right, Florida and Oklahoma taking this field in just a few short hours. One key matchup, one individual matchup that you have your eye on. Shannon, what do you got?
All right, I have my eye on Kadarius Toney versus the secondary. Toney is the most dynamic player on the Gators. He produces in the air and on the ground and has an insane amount of receptions at 70 for 984 yards, plus 10 TDs. He does more with less, and now with Pitts out, I said it in the beginning of the show, but we'll see that momentum change and what he can do in open space. He will be a threat to the OU secondary, and on all three levels, his explosiveness and direction changes will really tempt the TVs to dive in. So if cornerbacks aren't on their toes, they'll see Toney streaking up the field and turn around and go down for the touchdown. So what the secondary has to do here is contain and eliminate that created open space that Toney makes.
That was nice.
Caroline?
All right. I was like, oh, she's done. I'm going with James Houston versus Spencer Rattler. Now, James Houston is one of the best linebackers in the SEC against Spencer Rattler, who we know if someone creates pressure on him, he crumbles. So I think this is going to be a great matchup. I think that James Houston plays a lot like Kenneth Murray. We're familiar with that style of putting a lot of pressure on Spencer Rattler, and he doesn't have Austin Stogner, so I'm going to go into this later, but he's really going to have to rely on guys like Jeremiah Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, but that's if the run game can get out of the pocket. I think that James Houston is going to be a deadly matchup for Spencer Rattler.
James Houston threw a little fuel on the fire last week.
Oh yeah, I love him. I forgot, I wrote it down. He said in a press conference that Oklahoma is a good matchup, but they're not on our level. So that is another reason why I picked him, because he's either going to eat his words or he's going to prove what he said is true.
I talked about the Sooners' very talented defensive line last segment, and I'll go back to it here because the matchup that I have my eye on is that Sooners front four versus Kyle Trask, a guy that has not made many mistakes here in this 2020 season, but when he has, they have come under duress. And LSU, I think, provided the blueprint to beating Trask in Florida when they were able to apply consistent pressure off the edge all day long in their eventual 37-34 victory over the Gators. And I think, given the way that this Oklahoma line is playing, they can do what LSU did. They can replicate that performance, if not take it up another notch. And so I believe that if Ronnie Perkins, Nick Bonito, Perion Winfrey, Isaiah Thomas, and the whole crew up front can keep Kyle Trask running for his life, it's going to be very difficult for this Florida offense to gain any traction.
That also means that he won't be able to connect with guys like Toney and those other wide receivers and tight ends that he has out wide. And that's what Dan Mullen's game plan is get the receivers out wide and send them all the way down the field for Trask to just bomb it, because he can make those connections.
Final words. Shannon, what is your final word of the season? Let's keep it to one word, please, not two.
Oh, I did it
once.
One word. I did it once. Okay, so my final word is endure. What both of these teams need to do is make this team last and live on. For OU, it's really making a mark and inspiring next year's team to play the best that they can be and leading it into next year and just making it last.
Now, my final word is ending, which seems super cliche, but at least I didn't have to search a dictionary for mine like Parker has to every week. But ending, just because you've got to end on a high note. Now, every time you've played in a bowl game, it's been the playoff game against an SEC team, and Oklahoma hasn't done well. So why don't we end on a good note and beat Florida?
It's finishing strong and building on the future, too.
Right.
I like that word.
My final word is herald, because I think that this game can herald the beginning of a new era for Oklahoma football. I think with a victory over Florida, they can prove that they are finally on the SEC's level. They've been building in that direction for some time, but if they're able to overcome the nation's top passing attack and a team that is very much following the new SEC mold, spread offense, up-tempo, plenty of points, I think you're looking at an Oklahoma team that, as I mentioned last segment, can contend at a very high level next season and ultimately be in the conversation for a national title at season's end. So I believe that the outcome of this game will herald a
got
new
a lot of
era.
Christmassy going on.
I
You're
was
like,
gonna say,
I believe,
herald angels
true.
herald,
sing.
I believe.
Yes, hark this herald. All right, who are you calling out, Shannon? Sooner call out. Who do you got?
No other than Spencer Rattler.
Basic.
Hey, Spencer. I haven't called him out this season, all right? Spencer, what you need to do here is take all of the tools that you've learned throughout the entire season and put them into motion. You know what you're doing. I'm not worried for you at all. You need to keep that poise in the pocket and prove that you're comfortable with whoever you got out on the field. Make those connections and create those open spaces to hit your targets on the long run. Also, you got a great running back. You got great running backs and a great running back coach. Utilize that and utilize your options. Spencer Rattler, prove that you deserve to be out there. You shouldn't be transferring. You should be staying right here on the Palace on the Prairie.
Well, we're at AT&T Stadium, but
hey, this is a special game now.
So I'm going to call out Jeremiah Hall because, like I touched on earlier, in order for Oklahoma's offense to attack that Florida defense, they're really going to have to utilize those H-backs like we've capitalized on throughout the entire season. Now, without Austin Stogner, who's our big name guy, he's usually the person that Spencer Rattler relies on a little too much, but he gets the job done. Well, he's not there. So Jeremiah Hall, he's going to have to step up without his coach and get the job done.
This is a prove-it game for one guy in particular in that Oklahoma secondary, especially with Trey Brown opting out. I'm talking about Woody Washington, who has been outstanding for Oklahoma this season. Among the team leaders in tackles, had his first career interception in a big spot against Texas, and has played really good football for the most part, whether he's been at safety or at cornerback. Last year in the college football playoff, in that semifinal game in the Peach Bowl, Woody Washington was forced into action because the Sooners were shorthanded in the secondary and got exposed. And rightfully so, because LSU had what I maintain is the best offense in the history of college football. It was virtually unstoppable, but Woody Washington caught a lot of flack for his performance in that game. As a true freshman, it wasn't really a fair spot to put him in at that particular point in time, especially given that he was still making a positional transition, and he quite honestly would not have played if the Sooners had been full strength in the secondary. But he's taken huge strides in year two as a sophomore. And I think in this game, he really has a chance to redeem the narrative that he created. And I get that not all of that was within his control, but there is a narrative surrounding Woody Washington's name that dates back to that LSU game a year ago. And so with a strong performance in relief of Trey Brown, I think Woody Washington can put that narrative to rest. So I'm excited to see how he responds to the challenge of going up against Kyle Trask and this Florida offense. All right, lock in your score predictions, Shannon. What do you got?
I'm hoping to get one right this season. All right, I'm predicting 42-35 OU wins this contest. They're in a 7-game hot streak, and Florida doesn't have Kyle Pitts with them. I know that Trask and company will be able to keep up with the OU defense, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to pull it off. Its OU system is just less flawed than Florida, so I think that OU will ultimately pull off a win, especially now that Florida's in unknown territory.
I don't know that the score is going to get that high, and someone had to do it, so I'm just going to go out there with bold prediction and say Florida over OU 31-28. I think Kyle Trask is going to be able to run all over OU's secondary, and I think that James Houston's going to create a lot of pressure on Spencer Rattler. I don't think at any point in this game the Sooners are going to take a lead like they have been in the past, so I think Florida's going to come out on a consistent top 31-28.
I like the Sooners. I do. I think this is a prove-it game for them, not just for Woody Washington, but for them as a team going up against a different SEC opponent for the 4th consecutive bowl. I really believe Oklahoma gets it done this time around. I think the offense does just enough. I think the defense does just enough. It's not going to be an outstanding, phenomenal performance on either side of the football, but it's going to be winning football. And that's something that Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley emphasized very heavily in the aftermath of that Iowa State game, that they just need to play winning football. And I think they have the recipe and the guys in place to do it. And Kyle Pitts' loss hurts Florida. I don't know if we realize how much it hurts. I like the Sooners 38-31 over the Gators.
Left over right? Right over left?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know because I'm not rooting for them.
All right, folks. Well, we do not take this for granted. At the beginning of the season, we did not know if we would have a football season. We certainly did not know if we would have Game Day U. It has been a pleasure to bring this show to you every Saturday morning over the past few months. For Caroline Grace and Shannon Earhart, I am Parker Thune. Thank you to our sports director, Barry Orr, engineer Kurt Watson, assistant engineer Jared Thomas, and our creative assistant, Sydney Jordan, for all their work in putting this show together. Thanks, and we'll see you next season.